All right. I'm with Darvio Morrow, everybody. Welcome to Walk-ins Welcome. So good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited about just getting to know you a little bit more. I've been following you for quite some time on Twitter, X, whatever anyone wants to call it. And you seem to be, I love this description of you as like a maven of culture and media. This is um, my, a true maven of entertainment, radio, music, and politics. I
Oh
love the
wow.
word maven because it means you're kind of like you understand what's hot and cool, and you've been doing this for a long time. So before we get into any kind of topical stuff, I would love for my audience to get to know a little bit about you and just how you ended up as on your Twitter bio, X bio, it's media personality, but you're
Yeah.
so much more than that.
I appreciate that. And once again, thank you for having me. And yeah, I didn't really set out to be a media personality. I always had an interest in the business on the entertainment side and the media side. I had started in this space when I was 16 years old. I had started my first company, a record company that I still have to this day. And then
Wow.
after I got out of high school, I went to we have here a media school um, in town, and I went there. And after that, I spent a little bit of time I was at Urban One for a little bit. I did some stuff with Salem, and I was at ESPN Cleveland also. And in the middle of all that, was still building my company and working on my company and everything. And so officially, not counting 16, my career officially started at 19, and I just turned 39 last week.
Wow.
So it's been quite a journey of
So
how we
here
got
is
here.
Cleveland, just so the audience knows.
Yes,
You're
Cleveland.
okay, yeah. So you're based in Cleveland. You were born in Cleveland?
Yes, born and raised in
Okay.
Cleveland, Ohio. Yep.
Nice. Okay. How's Cleveland changed since you've were born there and were young?
That's a good question because I was able to kind of see all of the transitions. Like when I first my earliest memories was my mom working at General Motors. She used to sew Cadillac seats. And then the plant closed because of course going overseas and all of that. And I was able to see firsthand, and that never left me, how that impacted our life, where we went
Mm.
from being solidly middle class to poor overnight. My dad was a school resource officer. He was one of the founders of the Cleveland Municipal School District, which is the public school district here. He was one of the founders of their police department. So civil service worker. My mom went to Ohio State University extension after that, teaching. So they both were those type of workers. They didn't make much money. We struggled um, growing up. We didn't have much. And so I was able to see kind of firsthand, like even through my own life and my own life experiences, what happened when a lot of those things that we talk about and debate about today first occurred. And
Yeah.
so just digging your way out of that, and all of those sorts of things, and growing up in the inner city as well, and the dynamics that you had with that. Like I remember shootouts next door, and there was a stray bullet. I lived in a two-family house, and my grandparents stayed on the first floor, and there was a stray bullet that went through my grandparents' bedroom one night, and my grandfather's van got stolen out of the driveway in broad daylight with all of us in the house, and things like that. So having all of those having all of those memories and all of those experiences, while at the same time my parents really struggled and scraped everything together for me to be able to go to Christian schools in my
Mm.
community. So I'm living in these dual realities, and that kind of influences kind of like the nuanced way I approach things to this day, because I grew up going to one environment and then coming back home in another one and living in those dual realities at the same time.
And so you were what year was it when you were 16? Like 2003? Was it
Yes,
like the early
exactly.
2000s? Okay.
2003, exactly.
Okay. So, yeah, that is so fascinating to me that you talk about how these dual realities shaped your experience of right now in the media and the politics and the culture war. Because it sounds like you had a pretty stable home? Was your home stable?
Yeah, I had a good family. My parents split up when I was young, but they remained friends and stayed friends all the way until my father passed. My father passed in 2024. So I didn't have that level of turmoil. I mean, of course, having to deal with, the parents not being together in the home and all of that,
Mm, mhm.
but they were still friends, so that helped as well. And also having my grandparents there also, and even like when I was younger, my great grandfather was still alive, and I have memories of my great grandfather, and so our whole family history was really kept intact, especially after my family, both sides of my family came up to Cleveland from the South. My father's side is from Alabama, and my mother's side is from Tennessee. And so a lot of those roots still remained. My great grandfather passed in like 1994, I think,
Oh,
93,
wow.
94. So I was, still had memories of him. And, he was a very interesting character with a very powerful story. Like my great grandfather couldn't read or write, and was able to have a successful career in food service and bakery and stuff like that, and was able to leave a legacy of his own. And my great grandfather was raised by his grandfather, who was born a slave,
Wow.
and he passed in the 1950s, early 1950s, I believe. So I still have relatives alive today. Like I have aunts and uncles who are in their 80s and 90s. So I still have relatives alive today who remember their, slave born great grandfather.
That's crazy. I mean, it does put it into perspective how not that long ago it actually was. It
Yes.
feels long ago, but then people are alive to know people who were born slaves. It's not that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
so let me ask you, how do you feel about reparations?
Let's just get right to it, huh?
Let's get right into it.
I have mixed feelings about it because on the one hand, I hear the arguments from everybody. Because on the one hand, if you look at our history and you look at the things that we've been through, do we deserve it? Of course, we deserve it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do recognize and hear the arguments from other folks who are like, "Well, my family wasn't even here then," and things like that. Because I think a lot of times people don't really understand the way that the population is today, which is why I laugh at some of the racist white folks talking heritage Americans when many of them weren't here. Many of their like my ancestors were here longer than many of theirs were.
Right.
So but
They're
at the
like, "You're an
same
immigrant, actually."
right, right, but at the same time, it does make that conversation and that idea difficult to execute. And then to me, on the other hand as well, like I'm big on entrepreneurship and ownership, and I talk a lot about how our community, we don't own things, and we should own businesses and own commerce, because the only way that you get free, in my view, is through capitalism. We live in a capitalist society, whether you like it or not, and that's really the only way to get free. And so to me, um how does that work if we don't own anything, and then we're just turning around, okay, we get the money and then we just give it right back? Like how does that work? So I don't
Yeah.
so I'm not hardcore one way or the other on it, but I do think that there's questions that need to be answered. And I do understand the perspective of people whose ancestors weren't even here at the time. I would argue that if there was, if that conversation was to be approached, I think Jim Crow is actually the stronger argument because,
Mhm.
like, my mother remembers the tail end of Jim Crow. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, there are plenty of people still here today who lived through that. So I think, if we were looking at it from a Jim Crow perspective, I think that's a stronger argument. But I also think too is I don't think it's ever going to happen. So it's one of the reasons why I don't spend much time talking about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't like to waste time on things that I don't think will ever
I mean, it might in
happen.
California.
Well, yeah. True. True.
Have you evolved politically? Were you kind of always where you are, or is it are you someone who didn't pay that much attention to politics and then became political? Were you raised, I mean, you went to a, you said Christian school?
Yeah.
And so were you raised in a conservative house, or was it just, yeah, tell me a little bit about that evolution.
Yeah, well, I mean, most black Christians are culturally conservative
Right.
anyway. That's just kind of a part of our culture. I've always paid attention to politics. Like, I was one of those, kids looking at presidential election results and stuff like that. Like, I remember being in the fourth grade, drawing like my little fake magazines covering uh, Bill Clinton's reelection and stuff. So I've
Uh,
always been, I've always paid attention to it, and I had around the time I was in the sixth grade, I had a mentor. By the name of Reverend John Riley, who's since passed away, but he was a big time political figure in Cleveland, and was the first one to really kind of like uh, teach me the game, if you will, and to have me start kind of paying attention to it. For me, and you talked a little bit at the beginning in terms of like my approach. I've never been a hyper partisan person,
yeah.
because when you've seen enough of the game, you can't tell me when politicians go outside and have everybody hating each other, but I've seen you cut deals with one another. You
Yeah.
can't tell me that that's the approach that we should have, that we should all be fighting each other all the time, especially on things that don't matter. So I've always kind of had that nuanced approach. I mean, I have my own, political philosophy and political points of view, but I'm not a super hyper partisan person because I don't believe that it's beneficial for us as a country or us as a community. I interviewed our former mayor, Mayor Frank Jackson, multiple times. Had a very good relationship with him, and one of the things that he said, because he was a moderate person, he was a Democrat, but he was a moderate person. And one of the things he said was that he doesn't get caught up with these purists because to him, a purist on the left is no different than a purist on the right. They're
Mhm.
both intolerant of people who have a different point of view. And so they just automatically reject you. And then he added, he said, but we don't have that luxury as Black people, particularly the disadvantaged portion of Black people. We need to pick and choose what works for us. And
Yeah.
so that's my perspective. That's what I believe. I don't think being hyper partisan serves us. I try to call balls and strikes one way or the other.
It's funny, I was just at an event last night actually with Rob Henderson, the guy
Mhm.
who, kind of coined the idea of that concept of luxury beliefs, and this
Right.
this is what you reminded me of this when you were talking about what your mentor was saying, like, we don't have that luxury. We have to pick and choose what works for us, and unfortunately, the people who pass down these bad policies or ideas like defund the police don't seem to take any of that into consideration.
Correct.
Just
Absolutely.
seems like it gets, it's such a weird thing to it's such a weirdly, like, inverse racist thing to to speak on behalf of people who are telling you what their own mouth that they don't want something.
Correct, correct, absolutely. Yeah, that
So,
was
like
another we talked about a lot about that, especially when it was during the whole defund and abolish the police thing. And that was another thing that Mayor Jackson had talked about, and he was just talking about um people who, if you come, he was like, if you come into this with this idea that this political philosophy is going to be a panacea,
mm,
he said, you're in for a rude awakening. And he said, why? He said, the system doesn't operate that way. He said, the system is still what it is. And if you're able to achieve some of that stuff, you're only going to achieve it as the system allows you to achieve it, to continue the institutionalized inequities, disparities, and racism. So what you're trying to defeat is what you're causing to happen.
mm. Okay, yeah, Sarge Jackson, who is saying this. Yeah.
Yes.
Guys, getting older sucks. That's why it's so important to take care of yourself and pay attention to your health. This is something a lot of men ignore, and it is so important. If you hate going to the doctor and dealing with the hassle, we've got the perfect solution for you. With Quest Health's line of tests for men, you can order a multitude of men's health panel tests that keep you informed about your health. You can check your testosterone levels, get a prostate screening, a colorectal screening, or take their comprehensive men's health profile test for a more complete picture of your health and wellness. Purchase lab tests online, visit a nearby Quest Diagnostics location for a sample collection, no doctor's visit required, or get immediate results at home with at-home test kits. Your results are delivered online, quickly, and discreetly. So prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code WALK-INS25 to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code WALK-INS25 for 25% off. Link in the description below. Did you go to college?
I did. I
Okay,
did.
where'd you go to school?
So after I graduated from Ohio Media School, I just started my business right away, and then later, I went and got my degree at Liberty.
Okay. And what did you get your degree in?
It was a bachelor's of science in interdisciplinary studies. My concentrations was communications and psychology,
Mm.
because I was already in the communications field. And one of the things that I understood about communications, and I'm sure you know as well, is you need communications and psychology, because in order to be an effective communicator, it's half of what I say and it's half of how you hear it. Because when I
Mm.
say something, it goes into your filter and it goes into your worldview and your experiences and your traumas and everything that makes a human a human. So you have to understand human psychology in order to be able to properly communicate.
And even now today, we were talking about this last night at this event, just how much projection happens when you're online. I do it, we all do it. We interpret these things through our filters. But if you're somebody who, like you, have written some banger Newsweek op-eds, and I wrote some pieces that got some, feedback, we'll call
Right.
it. And it's always fascinating to me how the common reaction is someone reads what you say and then they interpret it, like you said, through their lens, and then they respond to you as if you wrote that in a letter directly to them.
Right.
Like,
Right.
well, why didn't you talk about XYZ? Or I can't believe, for example, when I talked about just how divorce never ends, that the piece brought up a lot of feelings for people, and a lot of people were like, well, so I guess my mom should have stayed with my abusive dad. It's like, A,
You're like, where
I
did you get that
clearly
from? I
said
didn't say
that.
that.
But B, what are you talking about? But that's a very common thing that I'm lucky my husband is a therapist, because I have a very hard time. I fully expect to be in the arena, getting dunked on, getting booed, getting shit thrown at me, getting cheered for, whatever.
Right.
But for some reason, when somebody, it's like deliberately, or they misinterpret me, or misrepresent what I said, it drives me crazy. And my husband Jared's always like, Bridget, this is all a part of it. You've got to let it go. And I'm like,
Right.
someone is wrong on the internet. Like someone's misrepresenting what I said on the
Right.
internet. That is not what I said. And I have the hardest time letting go of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have difficulties too. I mean, especially because people say my I don't even have a problem with disagreement. I
Yeah.
have a very low tolerance for stupidity. And so when I see people say stupid things, it drives me nuts. It
Yeah.
absolutely drives me nuts. And I'm like, what are you talking, like, you thought that made sense when you said that? Like you read that and said, "Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to hit post." Like that, those are the things that piss me off. Is the rank stupidity, especially when you're like someone like me, someone like you, we're not frivolous with the things that we say. We try to be thoughtful
Yeah.
with the things that we say. So when you put all of this effort to be thoughtful in the things that you say, and then there's still stupid responses, it's very difficult. It's very
And
difficult.
and I have to remember too that it's different. I actually respond to it differently when it's my writing than when it's something that I'm talking about. If somebody
Mhm.
clips me from a podcast or somebody clips me from Dumpster Fire and they misrepresent it, I'm like, "Ah, that's part of it. You're talking,
Right.
sometimes you say things if you get pulled out of context." But when it's part of a larger piece that's written and there's a clear beginning, middle, and end, and you it's like that for some reason, it's when it's the written word, it really bothers me because I don't and then you see this online all the time, you have to remember that, A, it might be a 12-year-old troll just
Yeah.
intentionally being dumb to get to
Right.
you, and
Right.
B, there is a we have a literacy crisis in this country. Like, there is an actual literacy crisis. People don't have reading comprehension skills at all anymore. It goes down every single year. The
Yeah.
younger the generations are, the harder time they have processing the written word in particular, and it is not just like a meme, it's an actual factual reality that I have to remember that we're grappling with now.
And you know it's hard to remember that, like, especially when you're in the arena. And especially for me, like, I still have a lot of that hood in me. So I'm like, what did you say? Who you, who you talking to like that? And my immediate instinct is to punch back. But
Yeah,
it's funny because I remember I'd gotten to a debate with someone who's here locally, online, and they had said something really, really stupid. And my mentor, Jerry Prim, he saw it, and we were talking about it, and he asked me, he said, "How many followers do they have?" And I told him the number. It was something like ridiculous, like
yeah.
under 1,500 or something like
Ye
that. And he was like, "How many do you have?" And I told him, and he was like, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself even talking to them." I'm like, "I know, but I can't help it,"
It is a
especially when
little
they say
bit
something
like
stupid. I'm
I
trying.
know, but it would be like Tom Brady addressing someone in the cheap seats, like,
Right.
I try to remember that a lot of the time because I see this on Reddit all the time now that I've gotten weirdly obsessed with, like, how crazy people are on Reddit in the past year,
Right.
and they'll be like, "Oh, these losers," and they're talking about all these people, and I'm like, "But they're doing things like, oh, these idiots who ruin comedy or all these," and it's like, you guys, why, how do you have somehow think you're superior to these people who are actually doing things and
Right.
you're literally just in the Reddit comments, like,
Right.
that's a weird mentality too. It is like I don't know if you're ever in service industry, but I've talked a lot about this. We coming up in the service industry before Yelp existed and before the internet existed, it was around the same time, but we always had secret shoppers and they would
Mhm.
come to the restaurant and you never knew who they were and you never knew when they were coming and they would evaluate the performance of everyone in the restaurant that they interacted with from beginning to end. And if you were the server and you were just hungover, having a bad day, it could like make their review of you could make or break your entire, you know, job as a
Right.
waiter or waitress. And now everyone's a fucking secret shopper.
Yeah, I think the greatest thing about the internet is that everybody has a voice. The worst thing about the internet is that everybody has a voice.
Yeah, exactly. And they think they have a lot of power.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then it's like it's so funny to me where I'll see folks like a friend of mine is active on social media. Her name is Nikki Johnson, and she's a doctor. And when she'll be talking about certain things that's in her purview, and then to see some random, probably sitting at home with in his drawers with Cheeto breath, arguing with this doctor about doctor stuff, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is that. So
Yeah.
I have gotten to the point where I'm not arguing with you on things when I know what I'm talking about. I'm one of those people that I will say, like, I don't do hot takes. So if I'm talking about something and it's something I'm not proficient in, I usually don't talk about things I'm not proficient in. But B, if it's a subject I'm not proficient in, I'm going to tell you that this is something I'm not proficient in, and I'm going to ask for different perspectives and different opinions. But
Mhm.
I'm not arguing on things that when I know what I'm talking about and I know you don't. That is
Right.
a complete waste of my time.
Yeah. I think it's when it's somebody at, a Cheeto breath or whatever, that's one facet of this. Then I kind of zoom out and extrapolate to the global perspective. And you have Candace Owens, for example, right now, who's saying things like the Iranians aren't protesting, which is, I guess she would be like the equivalent of a Cheeto breath to the Iranians, literally dying in the streets. But
Yeah.
it's just like
Yeah.
it's her platform is so huge that there are actually effects from her saying things like that. It's not just one Cheeto breath who's, like, coming at people who and doesn't know what they're talking about. This is somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about with a massively huge, enormous, really engaged audience.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
know what I don't know that there is anything you can do about it, but it does seem like, it's a frustrating aspect of our current media ecosystem that these are the people who are the have oftentimes the largest platforms.
Well, our current media ecosystem is trash. Let's just put it there. It's 100% pure garbage.
Was it ever good?
And
As somebody like you who's been in it for a long time, when do you think it was the best? What are we comparing it to?
So I think now there's always been problems. There's always been, issues with bias and things like that. And folks in my community have always had issues with access. Like I talked about earlier about, lack of ownership. It's really, really hard to have a accurate portrayal of you and your community and your culture in the media when you're not the decision makers in most of these outlets. So we've all had like there's always been issues. There's always been problems. I think the problem now is that you can say something that is demonstrably false with no pushback or very little pushback. Or when there is pushback, there becomes pushback against the pushback. It's like, oh, well, yeah, this is freedom of speech. And like, no, you have the right to say stupid things, just like we have the right to call you out and to challenge you when you say stupid things.
Mhm.
And I think, with these wild pendulum shifts, that's why I'm always talking in uh trying to be in the middle on a lot of this stuff because these wild pendulum shifts are what the problem is. So when you go from people who are on social media getting banned for saying things that were absolutely true to now it's the wild west, and that's the problem when you have those wild pendulum shifts from one end to the other, because now you're having people saying things that are really problematic and really causing problems and really motivating crazy and stupid people to do crazy and stupid things. And the nature of the internet is that the loudest voices are the ones that get the most attention. I call it the equivalent of standing in the middle of the street with your hair on fire. If you go
Mhm.
do that, I guarantee you, you're going to be viral. Like
Yeah.
you can become viral if you stand in the middle of the street and set your hair on fire. And that's the equivalent of the climate that we're living in. And the unfortunate thing is, it's hard to get actual information. It's hard to get actual news because there's so much crap. Like I remember when the Venezuela thing first happened, I just
Which
wanted to
we've
get a
already forgotten about, by the way.
right. Right. That's another issue too with like the news cycle doesn't last.
We
It
were
doesn't
talking
last
about this on
anymore.
Dumpster Fire today. We were like, we literally invaded a country and we're running another country, and it hasn't even like been in the news.
It's not front page news anymore, right? Like so that's another thing. But like when that happened, it took me forever to just find straight news on what happened.
Right.
You know what
Where
I
did you
mean?
find
And
it?
as I ended up having to, what I normally do is have to
You're
get
like,
bits and
I had to go
pieces.
to Venezuela.
Right. Pretty much, right? Like I have to go to everybody and just kind of get bits and pieces, get a little bit
Yeah.
here, a little bit here, a little bit here, because
Mhm.
that's really the only way now that you can get the proper information. So I feel sometimes for like the normies, as we always talk about, who they're just living their life and they just want to know what's going on. They don't have the time to
No.
do like we do this. So they don't
Right.
have the time to go do that. And that's why I am always madder at the people like the ones that you're talking about, because they're the ones who have the responsibility to inform their audience. But what they actually do is misinform their audience. And a lot of times they're doing it intentionally. Some of these people are not, even though they say stupid things, some of these folks are not stupid people. They know what they're doing. They're
Mhm.
doing it because it gets them clicks, it gets them dollars, it gets them views. And to me, it's like you're voluntarily pimping your own audience.
Wow, yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it. It does seem so crazy, and I just interviewed Michael Shermer yesterday actually about his new book, and it's all about truth, and I was asking him a similar
Mm.
question just about where does he get his news from now, how does he piece together, and he said the same thing, he's like, "Well, I have to go here and I have to go there." I'm like, "Michael, no one has time for this shit, like, how is a normal." And then you see the
Right.
news cycle when they show, just some perspective, the tweet that goes around that's like, "Here was the news cycle for the past week," and it was ICE, which was like the lowest bar, and then Renee Good, and there was a little blip, and then it was the Cub, the what was it, the
Right.
Bears. Like
Right.
Chicago Bears, it's like skyrockets, and it's like the
Yeah.
biggest search
Yeah.
for it, and I'm like, we're also in a bubble where, and I do think increasingly because people, this is why it's easier to just outsource your thinking to a tribe because of what you and I are discussing. So it's much easier for me to go, I'm on the left, I watch MSNBC, NPR, I trust those organizations to be telling me the truth, and I'm going to just listen to that and believe it because it's much easier than having to sift through 20 different commentators because it's not even a place anymore. No one really believes or trusts one
Right.
news source. You're like, all right, well, I can kind of get the truth or some semblance or an idea of the truth if I sift through 6 different news sites and listen to 7 different
Right.
commentators. Like, what?
Right.
No, and
Right.
no one's figured
Absolutely.
out how to
Yeah.
do this right either, by the way. I think there might be a market for it. I think Free Press tried to do it even with their own biases. I think Breaking Points tried to do it for a while, but I don't know what happened to
Yeah.
them. And then
Well, and I think and I think for me, like I don't expect you to be unbiased. I think when
right.
people say that they're unbiased, they're lying. because as a human, we all have biases as a human being. So I expect you to be biased. I just don't want you to lie to me.
Right.
Just don't lie to me. That's I don't think it's too much to ask of a consumer of news. Just don't lie to me. Have
Yeah.
your biases, have your perspective, paint the picture in your worldview. Just don't lie to me. That's all I ask.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, we do this a lot on Dumpster Fire because we often approach the news like a normie, where in the writer's room, we'll be like, all right, we're going to cover this. And it's like, has anyone read past the headline? And no one has, or I'm like, we are the problem, guys. But it is, it is very much, I will oftentimes be expressed to my audience like this is a purely emotional reaction and knowing nothing about this, because I think that is often interesting
Yeah,
too. My husband always says the way that he kind of evaluates news, because he's just more of an elevated purveyor of, he just seems to like have a very healthy way of taking news in, is that he recognizes how it affects him emotionally, knowing that it's meant to affect him emotionally. So he'll say,
right,
this is making me feel XYZ, mad, bad, sad, whatever. And then why do I want this to be true, or why do I want this to be false? And immediately kind of looks at his own bias, because then you're looking at, okay, well, what do I want this headline to be true? And if so, why? And then
right.
he kind of reverse engineers back from there. But then I'm like, well, how do you find out what's true or false? And he'll say, oh, well, if it's a study, I have to go find the study, and then I've got to go find out who did the study, and then I have to go look at the study. I'm like, who again? Who has time for this? Like,
That's a
and
lot
then
of
and
work.
like you and I said, the news moves so fast. In the time that it takes you to learn about whatever you're trying to process, we're already 6 news cycles down the road.
Yep,
I shot
yep.
dumpster fire yesterday, and we had too much stuff to cover today. I had to cut 3 stories.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could get a few weeks, maybe even a month sometimes out of a news cycle. Now your news cycle, then it went from that to like 2 weeks. Then it went
Mhm.
from that to a week. Now it's like 2 days. Like,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's not even that long, depending on
no.
what's going on. And that's the other thing too. I think some folks are on information overload
Mhm.
where there's just so much coming at them at one time that people just they do just mentally check out and go to their tribes, as you were talking about,
Yeah.
because it's easier to process, because we're not talking about small things. We're
No.
talking about, you know, we we kidnapped the president of another country and
We're
and
buying
now the
Greenland.
Middle East may be on fire again, and all
Right.
these different, like, we're not talking about small stuff. So sometimes just human nature, like, your brain can only take so much of this crap, and it gets to a point where you just shut it down and just want, for lack of better term, somebody else to think for you.
Yeah, and yet, this was a point that my writing mentor and coach made when he came on the podcast, Paul Shirley, that I think about all the time, and he wrote about it for our Substack. We Because of when we were on the savannah, thousands of years of evolution, there's no cap on how much information we actually want. So he calls it informational diabetes. In a way, we don't need that much information, but information was always a good thing to have. It was knowing where your enemies were. It was knowing if there was a tiger coming. And it wasn't as much of a fire hose coming from a doom box in our hand. It was more of what we knew from our environment. I mean, I was reading these notes I took from a class that like one of the great courses class I was taking on the French Revolution, and news during that time traveled 5 to 6 miles an hour.
Wow.
And now I I it's instant.
Yeah.
When we were filming Dumpster Fire yesterday, we were talking about the Golden Globes and Poly Market and all this stuff, and I was like, This is gonna be out of the news cycle." We always have a writers' room on Monday, and I was like, "This will be out of the news cycle by tonight." Like, the Golden Globes will be out by
Yeah, yeah,
Monday afternoon, it'll be out.
yep.
That used to be a week-long news cycle. I'm like, "I'm old enough to remember, kids, when people would be mad about the Oscars for 2
Right,
weeks."
right, right.
And
And
so, yeah, I think
now,
people are checking out, or they're kind of like us, where it's like my husband was saying today, looking at his phone, he's like, "Humans were not meant to take in this much information from all of these different sources and know all of this stuff going on and see all of this atrocities and violence I mean, how many people do we see killed just, like, every week now online? That can't be
yeah,
good for us."
yeah. I remember it was a video that had went viral. I forget the guy's name, but he was talking about the Charlie Kirk shooting, and he was talking about, regardless of, how you feel about Charlie one way or the other, he was like, you were never supposed to see that in
Mhm.
your entire life. In your entire life, you were never supposed to see something like that. And we all saw it on a loop on social media, unedited,
Yep.
over and over and over and over again. Those things aren't normal. When you see other things happen, when you see other people being killed, and instead of talking about our shared humanity, we immediately start arguing about the circumstances that led up to the person being killed. It's like we are becoming desensitized
Mhm.
to things that are happening in the world, and that's a dangerous, dangerous place to be.
And I'm gonna be fully, taking responsibility for my own role in this. We were just talking about this as well because we're like, "Yeah, we're becoming desensitized. This is so bad for our humanity." And also, why can't I stop sharing memes with my friends about this shit? Like, I'm part of the problem. Like, and also, did you guys see this meme? It's hilarious. And that's part of, like, being desensitized to it as well but it's also a coping mechanism
Absolutely.
for having to deal with seeing all of this
So
traumatic
much
stuff
of it.
constantly.
Yeah.
But that works I feel like they work in, they're it it's like a reaction to, but also part of the desensitization process.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree with that. And I also think, though, too, like you said, it's a coping mechanism. And the good thing about what you just said is that you're aware of it. You know it's a coping mechanism. I think some folks have actually just have cold black hearts now and just completely allow this thing to turn them against humanity. We're all like, we all cope in different ways. I am one of those people who will, try to crack a joke in the middle of of something really bad
Yeah.
to get through it. But I think that's different than people who don't care, who can see people get murdered, and all of these different atrocities, and don't care. You can see what by all accounts is a genocide in Iran, an actual real genocide, and you
Mhm.
can just brush it off, but like it's nothing. It's just another political thing to argue about. That to
Mhm.
me is the result of our desensitized culture.
I know, and I think about, like, I'm older than you by a lot. Well, not a lot, but a decade plus, and I grew up with the starving kids in Africa ads and the flies and all
Yeah.
that, and I remember my husband and I talk about this all the time, just, like, how much it affected us when we were kids. I really couldn't even it was so upsetting to me as a kid that there were kids that were starving, and I felt helpless, I could send them the dollar a day or whatever, but there really wasn't it felt really silly, and then you
Yeah.
found out later when you grew up that it was all us going not to them at all, and so it starts with that process, and then as I've gotten older and the internet has become, I've seen like beheading videos. I remember the post
Right.
October 7th stuff. I couldn't turn away, but I knew it was bad for me. Like, I feel a little bit this way with the Iran stuff, where I feel like there are certain situations, Ukraine, when that war popped off in 2021, I found myself, I guess I wanna give it, like, some kind of name, like
Yeah.
9/11 syndrome. Like,
Right.
it's like you
Right.
get gripped by the news, and yesterday, a bunch of stuff fell through the cracks, and forgot to call my sister, and I was really busy and shooting, but also I was like, "Where's my brain been?" I'm like, "Oh, Iran." Like, I'm just obsessed with what's going on in Iran, and it is like everybody sat on their couch for a week post 9/11 and just
Yeah.
consumed news and horrific images
Yeah.
that are now memes, by
Right.
the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and when you talked about like those videos, those commercials and things. So I'm assuming you're Gen X.
Yeah.
I'm at the older end of millennials. So I
Oh, you're
was,
elder millennial.
yeah. So I was very influenced by the Gen X stuff.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of those things too. And we were like, if you're an older millennial, you were the last group to grow up in the world, to have any concept of the world that you remember
Right, the
growing up.
before times.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Because a lot of this stuff, like I was an adult by the time everybody started going on Facebook. I was an adult by the time Twitter was created. I think I was either 16, 17 when the iPhone came out or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, you are yeah, I can see why the elder millennials, when I do stand-up comedy, they're like, "Don't leave us out," and I'm like, "Oh, no, you are more Gen X than you are millennial, actually."
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Culturally, we are.
you culturally were, and you remember cocaine without fentanyl. That that's my divider. I'm like, "Did your cocaine have fentanyl in it or not?"
Right.
Because that
Yeah.
is
I mean,
where I
and
divide up the generations.
right. Well, and a lot of the stuff that you guys created were the things that we consumed.
Right.
So as I was younger, the all of the hip hop guys that I loved, they were all Gen Xers. The
Oh,
TV
yeah.
shows that I watched were Gen X. Those were Gen Xers creating that and stuff like that. So our influence, we were heavily influenced by that. And I do think it makes a difference because we didn't grow up with social media. We didn't grow up with, like, I remember dial-up internet. Like, I'm old enough to
Oh,
remember
yeah.
dial-up internet, you know what I mean? So like it
2005, 2006 hip hop was so good. It was like, I wanna go back to those years of it. I feel like it was like the rhyme sayer stuff and the stuff that was coming out, of
yeah.
all of those guys were just dropping banger after banger album. It
And I was
was
working in
crazy.
hip hop full time at the time. Like, this was
Ah,
because
I'm
this was
so
right when I
jealous.
started. So yeah, yeah, I was working in hip hop full time at the time, and it's like the whole world is different. And I think that's another thing too, that my generation, like a lot of people, especially the older end of my generation, that folks get misunderstood or misconstrued, because here we are, we grow up in one world, and then boom, 9/11, Great Recession, COVID, all of these dramatic, traumatic things happening as we are coming of age.
Mhm.
And I think that had an influence on the way our generation thinks, the way our generation processes information, and everything, because a lot of us were the ones who went out and tried to do it the way that everybody told us to do it. They said, if you do these things, you'll get the American dream. But they didn't tell you that, there was going to be a 9/11 when I was in high school. They didn't tell you that there was going to be a financial crash and now you're not going to be able to afford anything anymore. They didn't tell you that you're going to have to deal with all of these different things. And I don't think us as a country, I don't think we've ever really wrestled with the after effects of all of those different things. We just went from one thing to another to another. We haven't dealt
Mhm.
with the after effects of COVID yet because that had a huge impact on the whole country's society.
Totally. I mean, this is the book I'm struggling to write right now. In some respect, it's processed like the last decade, mostly for me. Like, I
Right.
don't if I get to do it for anyone else in America, great, but mostly because I've been and became a media personality or whatever around a decade ago, and it's been just nonstop ever since. But
Yeah.
there's been so much that's changed culturally, but I agree, nobody's processed, like, any of it, what so much of what we're seeing right now, 5 years after COVID, which is also insane fact that I can't get my mind around, is all of the kids who were locked up during COVID and spent a year or 2 just online. They're all
Right.
coming of age now.
Yep.
And they're not doing that well.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
wait, how you were in high school, how old were you when 9/11 happened?
It was my freshman year of high school. I just
Wow.
got in high school.
That's so crazy, yeah, I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be in high school. I was in the green room the other night, and this guy was talking, and it was my friend and I who have been doing comedy for a long time, Ian Edwards and I were sitting there. This was actually, it was like, probably 6 months ago, and he and I were sitting in the green room just talking about, like, culture and politics and whatever, and then this other guy came in and he was like, "Yeah, when I was in high school, we had to do a whole, like, thing on Trump," and I was like, "I have never felt so old in my life." He's like, "When I was in social sciences class in high school, we had to write a whole paper on Trump," and I was like, "Oh my god, you were in high school when Trump" like, that was 10 years ago, so kids who are, like, in
All
their
right.
20s now were 15 when he ran the first time, and all their teachers lost their fucking minds. All of them.
Yeah, yeah. If you ever want to feel old, I did my show once at Cleveland Cavaliers Media Day. We go every year. And when you meet some of the younger players and they're like 8, like 19, 20, 21, like you will never feel more old than you do when you're with them. I'm not even 40 yet. I'll be 40 next year and I felt ancient when I was with the Cavaliers players.
Well, some of it too is because of the internet. So I was thinking about this the other day because we were posting a clip of like the looks maxing clip that was going around between Fuentes and Clavicular or whatever his ridiculous name is. And Clavicular was basically calling the funniest part of that clip was Clavicular telling Fuentes that he was old. And Fuentes is like 27 years old, and he was like, "I'm like 2019, bro." And I was like, "Oh my god. They must think I'm a grandma in this space because all these young kids they are native to the internet. They've been on it since they were kids. They were talking shit to each other when they were playing video games. They
You're
were
right.
all in 4chan together before it got shut down. These
Yep.
are it's a completely different they've spent almost more of their lives I'm just having this out right now. They've actually spent more of their lives on virtually than they have in real life. And you and I
Yes.
spent more of
Yes.
our life in real life going to clubs. I was just writing about this morning. Like the first protest I ever went to was in Minneapolis in 1999. It was a free Mumia protest. And and I was hanging out in a lot of coffee shops and like, no one does that anymore. These young kids are doing this.
No.
It was, but that was like we used to go see, Slug perform in downtown Minneapolis. There's a Bon Appetit, and he would but in the back room, like, people would break dance, and they would, like, spin records back when you actually spun real records, and DJ, and Slug would just freestyle. They would have, like, all these
Right.
rap battles, and that was, like, my young teens and young 20s. It was a
Yeah.
rich tapestry of smells and tastes and like it was a fully sensory experience, and it is ingrained in my being because of that. And these kids, their full sensory whatever senses they were using, their experience has been mostly virtual.
Yeah.
They talk
Yeah.
about going to 4chan like I talk about going to a kegger in the woods.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's just the world is completely different. Like I remember, being a teenager going to like we had teen nightclubs. It was a bunch of like clubs where we all like would go and drinking virgin daiquiris and pretending to be adults. Um, like that whole everything is gone. Like I caught the tail end of the. I'm just old enough to catch the tail end of the mall era where
Yeah.
you would go to the mall and kick it with your friends and all that kind of stuff. Like it's and the world is just completely changed. And I do understand that technology moves forward and never moves backwards, but there are some things just human nature wise that these things cannot replace. They just cannot replace human involvement, human interaction. We weren't created. God didn't make us like that. We weren't created to not have actual human interaction, actual human experiences. And I think a lot of folks use the internet as a replacement for human interaction instead of something that you can add to human interaction. It's not a good replacement for it. And we see the after effects of that with a lot of these antisocial, human hating people.
Do you have a lot of contact with, like, the younger generations in what's Cleveland like now? Is it I heard it was kinda like Ohio and Cleveland, and I hear it was kind of on an upswing after COVID because a lot of people went home or relocated or went back.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's our council president Blaine Griffin, who's a friend of mine, he always talks about, he calls it the tale of two cities, right? So there is success and wealth and a lot of good things going on over here, and then there's still issues with poverty and issues with still recovering from a lot of the job loss that came from deindustrialization and things like that. So it definitely is a tale of two cities. We were one of the cities that did benefit through as a result of COVID because our cost of living is low. And it's just I love the Midwest. I
Yeah.
love Cleveland. I love Ohio. I love the Midwest. It's just a different vibe than what you get on the coast. So there is that. But yeah, there's still like tale of the two cities where you're still dealing with. There are some people that are doing well, and then there are others that are not. And the thing that I'm concerned about, and you see in my writings and in the things I say on social media, I talk a lot about that we do need to be focusing on the working class and the middle class and things like that because you don't have a functioning city, a functioning society, a functioning country if the choice is only between rich and poor.
Yeah, I was reading an article yesterday just about how all the cheap airlines are suffering right now because the airlines that are catering more to the upper class are doing well. It's the ones like Spirit and all of these other ones that are really not doing well at all, which is and they were talking about how it's showing that kind of K-shaped economy even more starkly. The poor are getting poorer, the rich are getting richer. and there's a smaller and smaller number of people kind of sitting right at that K, right where the two
Yeah.
meet. And I'm not sure how you even go about it. Does seem like locally you could work on it. You know, I live in a part of outside of Austin in a suburb, and it's one of the fastest growing cities probably in America where we are, and Austin's still doing well. They did a lot for their housing, so rents are actually massively going down.
Mm.
You can get a two-bedroom downtown for like $1,200 now. It's crazy because they got rid of a lot of the red tape, and then there's a lot where out in my area, the Black population got very booted out of, like, Austin, East Austin, and they relocated to places like Round Rock, but there's so many Black-owned businesses. I think it might be one of the most, like, per capita most Black-owned businesses in America, so there's
Really? I
a
didn't know
lot.
that.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's a very solid. My neighborhood is very much like an H-1B visa neighborhood, it feels like. There's a lot of Indians and,
Mm.
one street, it's like, it's crazy, like, we it's at night some nights during, like, the Indian holidays, we're like, "Whoa, okay, the H-1B visa, neighborhood is in full effect," and that's great. Like, when I grew up in the suburbs in Minnesota, it was not as diverse as what my daughter's growing up in the suburbs outside of Texas, and I never would have guessed that. If you had
Right.
told me, "Hey, Bridget, where do you think the more diverse suburb is, Minnesota or Texas?" I would have guessed Minnesota, but it's not actually that been my experience at all. And and it's like really cool out here to see that the middle class is still it's still working.
Right.
It's still there's still the opportunity. I still see it working, but it really does depend on how much the state allows that energy to flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been my experience that there's a lot of folks who don't even focus on it. Like I mentioned, our council president, he's one of the guys who focuses on trying to do things to rebuild the middle class, and it's important because if people don't feel like the American dream, however you define that, if they don't feel like it's attainable, that's when you end up with all of the negative social indicators. That's when you end up with all of the issues. That's when you end up with crime. That's when you end up with all of those sorts of things because it's directly connected. It's directly related to feelings of helplessness and hopelessness.
Yeah.
When people lose hope, that's when you get all of those negative indicators. And if you ever look at studies on crime and poverty, it's when poverty goes up, crime goes up. When poverty goes down, crime goes down. It's directly connected like that. So
Mhm.
those things matter, and doing things to make sure that we have a functioning middle class that can actually get work, and you don't have to have a doctorate in order to make a good living. I think is very important and something that we do need to continue to focus on because without it, we're going to be in big trouble.
Mhm. Yeah, do you have kids?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay,
Yeah.
they're fun. You'd be a good I can tell you'd be a fun dad.
I
Do
appreciate
you
that.
want kids?
I do. I
Yeah,
do.
they're so fun. I started so late. I would have had probably, like, 10 by now if I had started earlier.
How many do you have?
I only have 1. She was kind of a
Mhm.
little bit of a miracle child. I mean, literally, I think she got the, like, last egg out of Nam. It was like like, I am fully geriatric mommy. I went directly from, like, breastfeeding to perimenopause, like, overnight. So she was like, "I'm here. I'm getting out," but she's amazing. Yeah, it's been I feel very lucky to
Congratulations.
it feels like a privilege to be her mom and to be able to it's very humbling. She called me a boomer the other day. I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be really humbling." Because I'm always calling myself a boomer when I'm using the remote because 'cause I'm just a, like, girl. I just am like, "I don't
Right,
know how to use
right.
this still." My husband's always like, "Just give it to me." And I was trying to find something for her, and I was trying to spell it, and I couldn't, and I kept messing up, and I was like, "Oh, mommy's such a," and I was gonna say retard, but I was like, "I shouldn't teach my daughter that word yet." And so I paused and she was like, "Boomer?" And I was like, "Or that."
Right. You're like, that works too. I get
You're
the
3 and a
I
half
hate
calling me a boomer, so I can't wait till you're 13.
oh yeah, that's gonna be fun. I get the now, especially when this gray started coming in my beard. I get the OG when I'm walking in the door or something,
Oh.
and I'm at the store, and there's a young dude, somebody in their late teens or early 20s. The first time I heard, I was like, "Who are you talking to? Like who's like?" Oh, and they're opening the door. You go OG and all of that. And I'm like, oh my god,
You're like,
like
"I'm the
that's
I'm
where
the
I'm
old
at
one
now.
now."
You're right.
What that I had a question too about that actually. It was along these lines about if you were going to advise one of these kids, 20-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, in doing what you did, what would you tell them not to do if they were to follow a similar path? Or, I mean, it's not really possible to follow a similar path like you or I because it's a lot of like hustling and opportunity and making your own opportunity. But what would you tell them not like what advice would you give them? What what would you tell them to do?
So what I would tell them to do, and my mom runs a nonprofit now, and so we deal with a lot of inner city youth and stuff like that. So I've had these conversations. What I would tell them to do is to stay focused. And no matter what, if this is something that you really believe in, something that you're really passionate about, don't let it go no matter what anybody tells you. I think what I would tell them not to do, especially if there's somebody who came from where I like neighborhoods like where I came from, is not to allow your circumstances to dictate your future. It is when you're starting from zero, and that's why I laugh when people want to have this, oh, it's merit based and all this merit based. That's a bunch of crap. Because if you know people and you come, your uncle so and so is a
Yeah,
banker, or your
or
dad does
senator.
this, or your mom,
Yeah.
right, right, you're good. You'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
But if you come from, places and spaces like where I came from, and you're starting from zero, it takes a lot
Yeah.
to not lose hope, to not lose faith. It took a long time for me to get to where I'm at. I remember where there was times where our lights were cut off and our gas was cut off. Even like times when after I'd started my business, there was one year that it was so difficult that I'm in Cleveland, the winter gets cold. And in my business, me and my mother and I had the choice: do we pay the heat or do we pay the rent for the business to keep the business open? And we chose to pay the rent. And so there was times where we were sleeping on the floor in my studio because it was warmer there than it was at my house.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot
Ugh.
to be able to succeed, especially when you're starting from zero. So don't and a lot of times people can see their environment, see what they're going through, see those experiences, and just quit. So what I would tell them not to do is to not let your current situation, your current environment dictate your future, because you can get out of it. It may not look like it right now, but you can get through.
So much like sobriety in a way. I mean, I was just having this experience going over the break, I actually had time to, like,
Mhm.
go through closets and organize and purge things, and It's like, "Whoa, I can see why I was avoiding this." It's just a graveyard of dreams, in this particular closet, and I had the greeting
Mhm.
cards that I started my company as a greeting card company in 2005 originally, and started a
Mm.
website and went bankrupt, and I had been married before to my first husband who died of a fentanyl overdose a couple of years ago, after we had broken up and whatnot, but still very strange, and so I found, like, the veil from my first marriage, and my husband comes up, and I'm just, like, sobbing, surrounded by, like, greeting cards and, like, a veil. He's like, "Oh god,
Yeah.
what did I walk into?" He's just like
Right,
it's like that, like, scene where he just, like, walks in the room and, like, walk out. He's just like, "Okay, I'll let you process this."
right,
Um,
right.
and it is I was there was so much, like, shame that was coming up about, "Why haven't I made it yet? Why haven't I broken through? How come I'm not a millionaire? Why didn't I sell all these cards?" What like, just beating myself up, and I was like, it that's the hardest thing too, I think, when you're an entrepreneur, is being able to say, "And I'm still here." Like,
Yes.
and I'm still here. Okay, it didn't turn out like I wanted to. Okay, I learned a lot of lessons from losing tens of thousands of dollars and having to claim bankruptcy the first time I started my company. I learned
Right.
lessons about, time management over the years. I learned and I didn't have it wasn't like I had a business partner and an investor, so it was just me, and I would have to abandon my blog and, like, go trim weed to make money so that I could keep going, and then I also was a raging alcoholic and addict in between all of this, and when I
Right.
first got sober, I felt like such a loser, and that was kinda like the same thing coming up recently when I was sitting here with all these cards and whatever. In the home that I purchased, by the way, this is why the brain is so full of shit, and
Yeah.
and I was like, when I first got sober, I could not see past my immediate circumstances. I was waiting tables. I was 35 years old. I had nothing. No, I had nothing. I had my job, which I was grateful for. I had my apartment, but I had nothing else. And I just a lot of memories and a lot of shame and a lot of broken dreams, and I had to somehow keep like, in recovery, they're just like, "Next right action, next right action, next right action," like, "Okay, keep d I had a sponsor who's like, "It gets better, I promise. It just, like just keep putting one foot in front of the other," and I could not see that, and it took me 2
Yeah.
years to actually see it, and so many people would give up way before that.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
it's 2
Absolutely.
years of fighting it, slogging it out, going, "I guess this is gonna improve if I keep doing this."
Right.
It's
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I've had that, sometimes too, where you sit back and you're like, why did this take so long? And I'm still
yeah.
not, where I want to be. I'm not a millionaire or anything yet. Um, but there's times where you're like, okay, like I'm okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're like, and sometimes you do, like your brain will take you down that path where it's like, why did this take so long? Because regardless, like you still have the scars from the
Yeah.
come up. You still have the scars from what you had to go through to get to where you are. Um and I think a lot of people don't realize that or don't recognize that. They just see you as a, oh well, she's a personality, media personality, she's an influencer, she is this, that, and the third, and people don't see the struggles. And it's the same thing with me. Like you didn't see me and my mother sleeping on the floor in my studio. You
Yeah.
didn't see, all of the different the hell that I had to go through to have even a little bit of success because of the fact that you're starting from zero. And
Mhm.
when you don't have a blueprint, when you don't like, you don't have any, nobody told you how to do this. You know what I'm saying? Like you had to figure it out. So it was like me and my mother and my father when he was still alive, we was figuring this out together.
Yeah.
Like none of us knew how to do this. We had to, figure it out. And
And this is
you
actually,
still
I
have
think,
all the
where, like,
scars.
AI is helpful. this is one area where I believe you could say, "Hey, I wanna do this," and
Mhm.
then I have no idea how to do this, and I'm starting from 0. What would you tell me to do? And AI
Right.
isn't bad at coming up with plans like that.
No, no, it isn't. I mean, I use AI. I mean, I'm concerned it's going to take over the world and kill everybody's jobs.
Sure, of course,
But
but
but yeah, no, it is very helpful, especially now. And I think too, and I'm not going to say it's easier because it's not, but it's different. There
Mm,
is the internet wasn't fully integrated in the economy when you started, and it wasn't when I started. It was just becoming part of it, and now, like it's so integrated now that you can use AI and figure it out in a way that wouldn't take you as long as it took me.
yeah,
Because part of the issue with me is I'm starting my career in the old world, and then the world completely changes,
yeah,
and so now everything that you learned, all the processes that you learned in terms of what you're supposed to do to get to where you want to go in the media business or in the entertainment business, you got to unlearn all of that and start over. And so those were the things that people like us had to deal with. Now, if you're native to this world, like you ain't got to go through all that.
yeah. No, I mean, I think about, like, family members of mine who are very young, and they're like young 20s, and they've got crypto investments, and they're like vibe coding and shit. I'm like,
Right.
can you imagine telling people to learn to code like just a decade ago, and now every person I know is vibe coding."
It's coding, right.
I'm like,
Right.
"What a
It's
dumb piece of advice that was."
right.
Like,
I can't tell you how many times I've tried to ask people, and I feel really stupid when I ask this question because I'm like, I think I'm a smart guy. How come I'm not understanding this? I ask people to tell me, like, how does crypto work? Can you explain to me? Because I don't want to put my money, I can't put my money in something that I don't understand. And I
yeah.
ask repeatedly, and it's not clicking. And I'm like, what is wrong here? Is my brain just not working on this
I
stuff?
completely understand this. I completely understand exactly what you're saying, and I seriously think it's just that, like, we weren't native to the internet. And these kids
Right.
were, they like, get it, they're, like, buying and selling it, it makes sense to them immediately, and I'm like, "Why does this not make," I understand that, like, way you
I'm
said,
just I
is my
don't
brain just not accepting this?
yes, I'm like, is something wrong with me? Like, am I like? And I remember I had a conversation with an artist of mine by the name of Aaron Malik, and he was just starting his YouTube channel, and he was creating a gaming channel where people would watch him play video games.
Right, on,
And
like,
it took me
Discord?
like 2 weeks. It took me like 2 weeks to understand the concept. I was like, wait, other people are gonna watch you play video games?
And pay you?
And it works. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well then I must be old because it took me like 2 weeks to understand the concept of that.
So are you still, is your primary thing that you're doing now, is it, what is it? The radio show? Is it, what's your, like, or is it all of it? Are you doing the record label?
So it's all of it.
Okay,
First for my company, First Class Broadcasting has all of it umbrella. So I have the radio network, the podcast network, the record label, our management of a local station here in Cleveland, this the
fun.
whole bit.
That's awesome. Well, oh man, I could talk to you forever. This has been, what's top of mind for you right now?
As far as like current events goes, Iran,
Yeah,
I
me
am
too, like I
very,
said.
yeah, very concerned about what's going on. I mean, that's a genocide. Like they're
Yeah.
just indiscriminately shooting people and killing people in the streets. I'm very grieved and concerned about what's going on over there and all that bloodshed.
Yeah, I just hate that Trump like, it reminds me so much of Obama where I was, like, obsessed with Syria when that was going down and Obama had his red line, and I was like, "Oh, good, we're gonna go in and save the people," and then I was like, "Oh, no, we're not," and they just all got, like, chemically poisoned and murdered, I hope it's not another one of those situations, like, to be like, "Help is coming," and keep encouraging them to, like, go out and while they're getting, like, murdered that's probably a red line for me where I'm like, "Alright, you're dead to me now after
Yeah,
doing nothing."
I hope that by the time this airs, we have blown something up over there. I'm really, because I don't want to see that either. I don't want to see us tell those people that we're going to help them and then don't. So I hope
Yeah.
that by the time this airs, we have blown something up already.
I'm having such a deja vu right now. That's so weird. Where can we there was a tweet going around too. What are your thoughts on, like, the Minneapolis stuff? Nuanced? Are you kinda, like, in the middle on this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, any loss of human life, just like we were talking about earlier, any loss of human life is sad, and unfortunate. That whole situation didn't have to happen. When I first saw, like, the first videos I saw, it looked really bad on the officer's part because it looked like she was turning away from him, and
Mhm.
it looks like he just shot in the car. But
Mhm.
when you saw the other video from his vantage point, even though the car does look like it was turning away from him, from his vantage point, he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And that, to me, I don't like the folks who are, celebrating her death or anything like that. I don't think that's a cause to celebrate. I think the whole situation is unfortunate. I wish people wouldn't block police activity with their vehicles. That's a really, really bad idea. And you've seen on social media, if I think the police, I'm not one of those back the blue no matter who. If I think the
Yeah.
cops are wrong, I will say that I think the cops are wrong. But in
I
this
got caught in
case,
an algorithm after you like, X's algorithm is so insane. If you like one thing, then it'll just feed you it's like,
everything,
the
right?
only thing, and I
Right.
watched one video, and it was a black guy going like, "What are you doing? Like, come on." And then it was an entire day's worth of just black guys being like, "What's Renee doing? Like, what are
Right.
you doing?" And there was like a it's always hard to and I was like, my entire algorithm is just black guys going, "Girl, what are you doing?"
Right.
Like,
Right.
it was just so I'm like, this was my gut reaction was kinda like, "Well, that doesn't seem smart." If an officer told me to stop my car and, get out, I wouldn't keep driving because
Yeah.
I'm not a crazy person, but, um it was it has been interesting to see even, like, the discourse on the left around it and in the aftermath, and then there's, like, this tweet going around where and from kinda like Black Twitter where they're like, "Hey, don't let these white people, like, coax you into these protests because 'cause they're looking for, like, another sacrificial lamb for, like, George Floyd point 2.0."
Mhm.
What are your feelings when you watch, like, the discourse like this of, like, all of these kind of white saviors getting into the mix, and then you have, like it really was, like, my it was an entire 24 hours of just people being like, "Why are you doing this? You what are you
Well,
doing?"
there's a lot of that. I mean, I often criticize what I call white paternalism. And white
Mm,
paternalism to me is nothing but a cousin of white supremacy because it still robs us of our agency.
yep.
So when you jump in front and like, hey, little darky, I'm here to save the day, like that, I hate that with a passion. I hate that with the fire of a thousand suns. Because again, you're not to me. That's not an ally. An ally is somebody who stands with you, not someone who jumps in front of you and makes it about themselves. So there are certain things that unfortunately that happened in that car that in our community, we've had those conversations where it's like, don't do that. I'll never forget. I'll never forget. I was with a friend of mine. This I was like 17, 18. I was with a female friend of mine. She was white, and she came from the suburbs to the hood where I was living to pick me up, and we were going somewhere, and we turned the corner, and the cop pulled us over. And we knew it was profiling from the very beginning. He comes to the car, she cusses him out, like completely
That's
curses
crazy.
him out because she knew we both knew that it was racial profiling, but she curses him out. I'm terrified because I'm telling her, yo, chill. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm like, if he get mad, he ain't gonna shoot you, he gonna shoot me.
Yeah.
So yes, there is a lot of conversations like that we have had where it's like, mm-mm, don't do that. And look, I do appreciate outraged white folks when they are outraged on injustice happening to black people. I do appreciate that. But please don't get yourself killed, and please don't get us killed.
Yeah, I think I feel like because I did so many drugs and was, like, always we lived in, like yeah, I feel like I had a much different relationship to the cops than a lot of the, like, kind of, like, suburban white chicks I knew. I
Right.
used to go to this, like, it was a pretty, like, fancy 12-step meeting, and women would always tell their stories of, like, how they got pulled over and, like, "Oh, and the cop just let me," like, their story, and you could see the black women in the back of the room just, like,
Mhm.
rolling their eyes,
Like, are
like
you serious?
yeah,
Like,
and this is where when people are like, "Oh, white privilege doesn't exist," I'm like, "There is," like, that's not entirely true. We
right,
can we have a conversation about how there is certain like, I can tell you that there are things that are gonna be let slide, and I do see this with sometimes I just don't think even, like, white allies who think they know, they just don't know, like, the way I've seen women behave in ways in front of cops, and I'm like, "Oh my god, are you crazy right now?
right,
Just do what he says," and
yeah,
they'll be just losing their minds, I'm like, "You could not get." I don't know, I grew up, like, you can't do that. You just
no,
can't.
no,
I was raised to be like, when you get pulled over, make sure you show your hands, don't do anything, no sudden movements, listen to what they say, be polite, none of this wilding out.
no. Like I told you, my especially like my grandparents' age group of the family, they came from the South, and
Mm,
my dad was born in the South, and they tell you, my grandmother was really big on like, make sure you make it home.
yeah,
Do what you got to do to make it home. She said sometimes, and she used to always say, sometimes you got to take the wrong for the right, because sometimes you could be dead right too. So the most important thing, and those are the conversations, as we just talked about the privilege thing. There are a lot of folks who've never had to have the talk, right? What we call the
yeah,
talk. And the most important thing is make it home. And that, like, above all else, make it home.
yep. That's, not something I don't think a lot. I mean, my friend was just telling a story about how she went out with one of her friends and she was, like, getting drunk and was acting up and talking back, and she was like, "I had never seen this in the wild," like, this kind of behavior from a white lady in the wild where she was, like, yelling on behalf of her. She's like, "Oh, you're not letting us in because she's Mexican, huh?" And she was like, "Oh my god,
And
no,
you
it's
like,
because
chill out, chill
you're wasted."
out.
Yeah, she was, like, shocked. She's like, "I didn't think this happened." I'm like, "Oh, no, it happens."
It
What
does.
is your biggest defect of character?
I got trust issues.
Mm,
That's yeah. I don't trust a lot of people. Now the people I
yeah,
trust, like, if I'm with you, I'm with you. And I'll go through hell and back with you. But yeah, I would say that trust issue.
What's your biggest asset?
Flip side of that, loyalty. I am extremely loyal. I am loyal to a fault. Like if I'm with you, we gonna ride to the wheels fall off.
And where can we find you?
You can find me at D the Kingpin on all platforms. That's DTHEKINGPIN.
Do you go to a lot of comedy when you're in town in Cleveland? Is the scene good there?
Yeah, I'm a comedy fan. We have two big comedy clubs here. We have Hilarities and there's I think it's called the Funny Bone now,
Yeah.
in Cleveland, and a lot of the big acts go to one or the other.
Oh, fun. I wanna try
Yeah,
and come through.
absolutely.
Well, my friend, if you're ever in Texas, let me know.
Yes, for sure. I have family down there, so I'll
Oh,
definitely
nice.
let you know. Yeah.
Yeah, come through. So, I appreciate you and, your voice in this insane discourse. I hope more people check out your work. You're one of the people that I turn to when I'm like, "Oh, am I crazy?"
I
No.
appreciate that.
I
Thank you,
mean,
and thank you
yes,
for
but
having me.
no. Keep
Right,
grinding.
right. It's like, yeah, well, we're all a little bit crazy doing this crap, but you know, but thanks for having me, and one day we got to get you on my show too.
Yeah, anytime, anytime.
Awesome,
All right,
awesome.
thank you. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.